Hey everyone. In this video, I want to talk about update management for my resources. Now, those resources could be in Azure, and they could actually be somewhere else, like on-premises or in the cloud. And I'm going to talk about two different solutions. There's update management, which is our kind of GA solution right now, and then there's solutions that are coming but don't really change functionality. It changes the plumbing underneath. So I'm going to talk about both of those things. First, as always, if this is useful, a like, subscribe, comment, and share is definitely appreciated. Now, our focus on this is really around sort of IaaS virtual machines. If we always think about the types of resources we have and responsibilities, well, if I think about a virtual machine, if I'm talking IaaS, then I am responsible for things like the OS, the runtimes, the middlewares, the application, and the data. That's all my responsibility. There are tools to help me, but it's my responsibility. So when I think about the OS, well, that includes kind of setting the OS, but also obviously patching it. That's kind of a huge part of it. Now, also, I'm talking about pets. What I mean by a pet is an instance that we really care about. It has some unique state. I would fix it if it was having problems, we name it. This is not cattle. Cattle would be something like, well, virtual machine scale sets. So with VMSS, I have some kind of gold image template. I have some set of kind of configuration extensions that I apply. I have some scale configurations, including auto scale, and then it just goes out and creates them. But there's nothing unique about those. I generally will not be patching those. What would happen is, hey, I have a new version of the image, so a new version, it could be from the gallery, or it could be from the shared image gallery, and it's a private image, and I publish a new version, and that new version has the patches, and then I would just kind of destroy and redeploy them because there's no special state. VMSS even has built-in capabilities that if it sees a new version of the image, it will actually go and roll it out over that deployment. So I'm not going to be patching those individually. We just redeploy them if there's a new version of the image that has the patching in it I want. So our focus is here on these kind of pets, these virtual machines. Now, I probably already have a solution. I'm doing something maybe on premises. Now, that could be something like System Center Configuration Manager, and I could absolutely bring that to the cloud. If that's working for me today, I could have things like distribution points, things like cloud distribution points. I could use that to patch these. So I could definitely just use my existing investments if I wanted to. But there are also some kind of cloud native technologies to Azure, and that's what I'm going to focus on. So the first one is update management. Now, if I think about what is kind of update management, it's really comprised of two key things. Now, the first part of this is we're going to have a log analytics workspace. So we used to log analytics. It's that place I can send logs and then run analysis on top of it. So it's going to use that to get information from the operating systems about, well, what patches do they have? What patches are they missing? Get kind of that overall state. And then it's going to use Azure automation. So it's two components that are going to be part of this solution. Now, those things get auto-configured for me, but it's going to leverage those. And what it actually does is if I think about, for example, that virtual machine over there, we'll kind of draw it again. That means I'm going to absolutely have kind of that log analytics agent installed. That enables it to go and talk to the log analytics workspace and is also going to install kind of this hybrid runbook worker, which enables it to talk to Azure automation. So we can go in, hey, I need to do this. I'm performing these various actions. So there's going to be two agents we run inside of our operating system to enable this to actually work. Now, in terms of what clients are actually supported, if I bring up the documentation page, we can actually see, well, great. So there's all these different Windows Server 2019, 2016, 2012, 2008 R2. And then things like CentOS 6, 7, 8, Red Hat Enterprise, Linux, SUSE, Linux Enterprise Server, Ubuntu. So these are the key ones that are supported kind of by this solution. Now what's going to happen is when we enable this OS instance, and again, this could absolutely be, so actually draw this over here. It's supported on Windows and it's supported on Linux. And it's going to use whatever source is defined for its patches. So for example, on Windows, this could absolutely be Microsoft Update. So that cloud service, which means obviously it's going to need to be able to get to that. It's going to need that internet access from that virtual machine. But I could also use something like, well, WSUS. Whatever that OS is configured to use, and I just realized I wrote Windows wrong. It's interesting. It's early in the morning, Windows. Whatever it's configured to use, so I could have used group policy, I could have used some declarative configuration. It's going to use that for the source of what patches are available and what ones I'm actually going to go and pull these down from. Likewise on Linux, Linux could use kind of a public repo. Or once again, it can use kind of a private repo. So I kind of have that choice. Now, obviously with Linux, there's different solutions used depending on the type of Linux distribution. If, for example, I am Ubuntu, so Ubuntu is going to use APT. If I'm using Red Hat, then I'm going to use Yum. And if I'm SUSE, then it's going to use Zipper. So they have those different solutions, but fundamentally, whichever way it's going, public or private, it's using the native technology of the operating system to actually go and work out what patches are there, and that's what it's going to use to install them. Key point here, whatever it's talking to, that is the source of truth. i.e., if I'm pointing to WSUS for Windows, and in WSUS I've not approved all of the patches, it's missing some, it has no way of knowing there are other patches out there. So when it goes and reports in to the log analytics workspace and the overall solution looks at, well, what patches do you need? It can only see the ones that it knows about from whatever source it's using. So the source of truth here is whatever you configured the OS to use for its patching. There is not some other source of truth that it knows about other patches from. It's going to use whatever is there. Now, after a new patch is released to any of these things, for Linux, it's going to show up normally within a couple of hours. For Windows, it could be 12 to 15 hours. But there's going to be these compliance scans running every 12 hours for Windows, every hour for Linux. So it's going to get detected and known really within half a day. So a key point here is the technology is just whatever it's used to. Now, can you install third-party updates? For Microsoft, if it's a Microsoft product, yeah, they're available through Microsoft Update as well. If it was a third-party application, there are some things I can do to kind of force a package into WSUS. So there is this WSUS package publisher, and that would enable me to kind of push patches and make them known to WSUS. So then, yes, I could make them available through this solution. Linux, it's easier. Linux, hey, look, if it's in the repos that it's pointing to, it's probably going to work and I'll be able to push it. So that's an easier thing to do. So the main steps are actually pretty simple. Essentially, I'm going to onboard my virtual machine into the update management solution. So it's going to get the log analytics agent running on it. It's going to get the hybrid runbook worker running on it, talking to the Azure automation account. It's then going to run compliance scans to see, well, what's it missing based on whatever source of truth it's pointing to. And then through the Azure automation, I can define these schedules of, hey, I want to actually go and deploy this. So this is probably easier to let's take a look at this in action. So if I jump over, let's close that down. So we can think about starting with, hey, if I just had a regular virtual machine, if I scroll down to operations, you'll kind of see this guest and host updates. Now, if I select that, you'll see I have update management. And from here, because I've not configured it yet, it's saying, hey, look, I'm going to use a certain log analytics workspace because it's already reporting to one. And then I need to create an Azure automation account because remember, that's what's going to then talk to the hybrid runbook worker, which will get installed on this box and talk to it. Once that's configured, if I jump over to one I made earlier, now I could kind of go into that same thing again, and now I'll actually see, oh, okay, well, you're missing kind of these patches. I could see my deployment schedules, but this is kind of one machine at a time. So what I'd rather kind of do is manage multiple machines. This is really where the power comes. And when I click this, what it's actually going to do is go to the Azure automation account that I've configured, and then it's going to go to this update management portion. So I could absolutely jump directly to that. So I go to my automation accounts, go to my automation account, and then click update management. So now I'm back in the same place. From here, this is because I've got the log analytics workspace and I've got my Azure automation account. The next thing I'm going to do is onboard virtual machines. So I could say, hey, I want to add Azure VMs, and it's going to go and search. Now I could filter this down. It's going to find all of the ones that I don't currently have. So I could say, hey, what locations do I have? And it's checking, saying, oh, well, there's an issue on this VM, but all the rest are already enabled. So I could filter that down. But I could go and check these virtual machines, and I could say, hey, onboard that. I could click this enable button at the bottom. I want to onboard them to the update management solution. Now, once I've done that, notice I can also do non-Azure virtual machines. Now for this, basically it's going to take me to documentation that says, hey, install the log analytics agent, because that gets it talking to the log analytics workspace, and then it's known, and then I can do the update management. Now, one of the nice things actually about this is that it is free. There is no cost for this, apart from log analytics workspace data. If I actually look at the pricing, we'll actually see when I go to update management, even for on-premises, other clouds, it's free. Any node is free. What I pay for, though, is the data in Azure Log Analytics Service. So it kind of talks about you only pay for log data stored in that log analytics service. So there's some charge to make sure your data retention settings, make sure you're thinking about that. But I can manage on-prem, Azure, really anywhere where I put the agent. So I'm going to onboard the machines. The next thing I'm going to want to do is kind of schedule update deployments. Now, it's going to take a while again to come back with its status. Remember, the VMs have to go and run that compliance scan we talked about. Once it's onboarded, see which ones it's missing based on whatever source of truth it's been configured to use. If I've not changed anything, it's probably using, if it's Windows, Microsoft Update. If it's Linux, the public. But if I'm using group policy or something else, I might have changed it to point to WSAS or some private. So it's going to run that compliance scan. So once it runs that compliance scan, it will then show me, hey, I'm compliant, or I'm missing these various updates. I could go and see, hey, what updates I'm actually missing. Then I'm going to want to go ahead and schedule an update deployment. Now I give it a name, and I target different deployments for Windows or Linux. Now I can then pick the groups of machines based on two different options. Either I can basically define a kind of filter. So I could filter it down to certain subscriptions and certain resource groups. Let me just pick one. To certain resource groups. I could filter it to certain locations. I could filter it by certain tags. I can basically add in based on these kind of items. So it's a dynamic collection based on those things that I'm actually defining. I can do the same for non-Azure. So that's one. It'll just automatically, hey, whatever fits this thing, maybe I'll have a tag based on update schedule, and so it will automatically bring those in. Or I might say, I just want to select the machines. So here I could actually just go in and maybe I could just say machines, and it'll show me kind of all of them that are Windows. And I would actually select the ones I want to actually be in there. So we'll say I could just select them, and then that would be part of it. So I could drop those in, and they're now selected. So I'm going to typically do one or the other. Either I'm going to specify the machines directly, or I can use this kind of dynamic. I could use both. If I select both of those, it's going to do the union. So the kind of sum of both of those things together. But typically you'll just do one or the other. Now I can select what update classifications do I want. So for kind of Windows, we see all these, hey, critical, security, update, feature, service packs, definition updates, etc. I can specifically add to either include specific ones or exclude specific ones. I can pick the schedule. So is this a one-time patch I'm rolling out, or actually I'm going to run this every day or every 2 days or every week? I could set if it expires at a certain time. Basically, I'm setting a time for that deployment. I can have pre and post scripts, so I could run something before the patching and then run something after the patching as well. So I can hook in and do additional things. I can set the amount of time it has to perform these patches, and if I'm going to reboot. So yes, I'll reboot if it's required, or hey, don't reboot, or only reboot, don't install the patches. So I go and create these schedules. Now, I already have them. So if you go to the tab Deployment Schedules, I can see, hey, yeah, I have a Windows one, which again is just based on a group. It's anything I basically have. So it's that Azure query, and I can preview and see it would include all of those machines. And then I also have one for Linux, and the same thing. It's just basically all my Linux machines. For Linux, it's critical and security, and I've done other. And both of those are on kind of a daily recurrence. And then that's just going to go and happen. Now I can see the history. You can see I've actually got some failures. I could go and dive into those. So Linux and Windows were working here. Then I had some failures. Well, then I had successes. So I can actually go and see the detail of each of these kind of run jobs. Well, okay, oh, so that failed to start. That's okay. So I would go and dig into that. But I can get the detail of exactly what happened on each of those kind of runs. And that's really it. So once you've defined these things, it's really just going to go and do all that work for me. So that's kind of the today update management solution. So Windows and Linux, I can set what patches I want. I can set windows, the maintenance, durations, very flexible. The pain point people have found are these kind of cogs, that I'm maintaining this Azure automation, I'm maintaining this Log Analytics workspace. Also, Log Analytics workspace is not really designed for very granular role-based access control. So if I have everyone coming into the same Log Analytics workspace, it's not that easy to say, hey, you're allowed to patch these machines, but not those machines. So realistically, app teams might only want to see their machines, or I only want them to be able to do things to their machines. So that's today, that's update management. So what we have coming and now in preview is we have this kind of automatic VM guest patching. So this is kind of a new solution. If you go and look at the page, we can go and look at this quick. It is in preview right now, so I could absolutely go over to this. You can kind of sign on to onboard this, and it's just going to automatically deploy the patches. Now, once again, this is kind of Windows and Linux, but I have basically no control over this thing. So what the automatic is going to do, if I think about it from a patching perspective, it's kind of the critical and security. That's it. That's what it's actually going to go and push. There is no time control. I can't set when it deploys. I can't set a window. This is kind of set it and forget it. I cannot stop certain patches. Hey, this particular .NET patch is going to cause me a problem. Don't push it. I have no way of doing that. I literally can do nothing. Now, this is used by a lot of Azure servers, internal services. This will be super maybe useful for kind of dev test, where I don't really care. I just want these things pushed out and deployed. And what's phenomenal about this solution, there is no log analytics workspace. There is no Azure automation. There is only an extension. It's using the Azure Resource Graph and the native resource capabilities. So the Azure Resource Graph is the data store. There's not some log analytics workspace I need to go and track that. It's native to the resource itself. So if it's virtual machines or virtual machine scale sets or Arc for servers, it's just integrated into the compute service or the Arc service. There's nothing else I have to do. And the patches will be installed, well, within 30 days. That's my level of control I have for this. Now, it does use kind of the availability principles when it's doing this availability first. So it's not just going to take a whole bunch of stuff down. So the idea of that is, well, it wouldn't deploy to the same paired regions. So it is considerate. So it's this availability first. It's not just going to go and take everything down. So it's not going to do paired regions at the same time. It'll only do one AZ at a time. If I have availability sets, it's only going to do one update domain at a time. So it's going to kind of protect from some kind of mass impact as part of the deployment. But I have no control over this whatsoever, and I can only do those things. But it's super simple. It's just, hey, I basically going to turn it on, I set it and forget it. And now I know, hey, my Windows, my Linux virtual machines will be within 30 days, they're going to have all the critical and security patches. So again, this right now is in preview. So there's obviously a gap, yeah? So we have update management is great, it's flexible, I can configure all these things, set the types of patches I want, but I have these kind of bits that are not that friendly. There's some cogs that I have to manage. Then we have this super friendly thing, but I have no control. So what's coming is Update Center. So Update Center is going to, this automatic VM guest patching agent, this is what's going to form the foundation for Update Center. But Update Center will bring in kind of the flexibility and the configuration options of Update Manager. So Update Center will add back the idea of, hey, I can have the different kind of categories of the patches I want. I can kind of set, hey, the time and the duration of those things. I can do kind of approval. So that's where it's going, but this has kind of been mentioned by the PG, but we don't really see anything about this yet, but that's where it's going to. But obviously from a feature perspective, it's really the same as Update Manager, which is what we have today. What's going to change is the plumbing underneath. Hey, I don't have to have Azure Automation and Log Analytics workspaces anymore. It's just going to use the Azure Resource Graph for the data and the raw compute, the Arc resources to actually go and do those things. So it just removes some of that kind of plumbing underneath to simplify it. But that's where we are. And you could think about when this is available, then that would be my production things where I want more control. I might want other types of patches on. So today, the production solution is Azure Update Management. Windows, Linux, on-prem, Azure, full control of when, what I can exclude, I can include, I have all that power. Where that's going is to really change the plumbing. Get rid of the automation log analytics workspace, but keep all the functionality. Today we can start to get a glimpse of that. If we're okay at just auto doing the stuff, I can turn on in the preview this automatic VM guest patching. I'll only get critical and security. I have no control. I can't exclude or include. But within 30 days and following availability first sort of concepts, I'll get my patches. So that's where we are. I hope that was useful. I hope it clarified a few things about what I can do with the native Azure functionality. Until next time, take care.